I woke up one morning to find a wonderful pattern on my window and I posted it on Facebook. I had several suggestions as to what might have caused this on my window. The two front runners were either it was a bird, or on the other hand it might have been a fairy or an angel. I wondered about that. I thought it would be fun to use Occam's razor to decide which of the two hypotheses was correct. Now, I don't know anything about Occam. William of Occam it's called, Wikipedia tells me, and he was born in 1287, a monk, a philosopher and a theologian. Okay, and he came up with this principle, Occam's razor. It's a problem-solving principle that the simplest solution tends to be the right one, the simplest solution. So, when presented with competing hypotheses to solve a problem, we should select the solution with the fewest assumptions. So, is it a bird? Did a bird make that mark on my window? Well, first assumption, birds exist. Oh, that's not an assumption, is it? I can just look out of my window and see the birds. The size of the pattern was about a pigeon-sized. So, are there any pigeon-sized birds frequently in my garden? Oh yes, I'm often woken up by pigeons, surprisingly enough. Okay, so very few assumptions go into the hypothesis that it was a bird that made that mark. Now, how about thinking if it was a fairy or an angel? Right, well, the first assumption is that they exist. I mean, lots of people believe that either fairies or angels or both exist, but we can't easily demonstrate that. I can't point out my window and say, look at those fairies dancing on the lawn. Look at those fairies sitting in the tree. Look at those angels floating around. We can't do that. So that's an assumption. Then there's the assumption that a fairy or an angel, as a spiritual being, would have a physical effect on my window. Well, we've got no evidence for that either. So that's a big assumption. So you can see that the bird hypothesis has very few, if any, assumptions, whilst the fairy, angel, supernatural explanations have lots of assumptions. Well, it's obvious we should choose the simplest of those two, which is that a bird thought it was going to crash into my window and put the brakes on, and then actually just gently crashed into the window and left dust all over it. Luckily it didn't die. I did go downstairs and look, no dead birds around. Whatever hit the window survived to play another day, which is good news. Okay, so that's a simple example of Occam's razor, but I thought we might use that to think about the empty tomb. All of the four Gospels have women or a woman finding the tomb empty. So there is a possibility that there is some historical truth for that. My first idea was that maybe the women had gone to the wrong tomb. Maybe there were dozens of tombs around and they just happened to go to the wrong one. But actually, the Bible itself has an explanation, a naturalistic explanation. Matthew's Gospel says that the chief priests bribed some soldiers to say that they had moved the body, to try and disprove the resurrection. But actually, maybe the truth is some soldiers did move the body. That would be a good naturalistic explanation, wouldn't it? And very few assumptions. I mean, we have to assume that the soldiers did move the body and we don't have any reason for that. We would have to, or we'd have to assume that the women made a mistake. But both of those things are easily possible. However, the supernatural explanation, on the other hand, has a huge number of assumptions. First, that we are assuming that somebody can come back to life. Well, that is not generally the case, is it? Not after being hung and speared and flogged and crucified. No, people don't come back to life. Then we've got the assumption that Jesus came back to life with the power to teleport. You know, he could suddenly appear inside a room or suddenly disappear. He could teleport from here to there. We've never seen anybody like that. That's a huge assumption. And the more we look at it, the more assumptions there are. So it seems to me using Occam's razor It's simpler to think that either the women made a mistake or the soldiers moved the body, but not that Jesus rose from the dead.
It ain't necessarily so. It ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, it ain't necessarily